One of the hardest things about wanting to help people is that they don't always want to be helped. Sometimes that is communicated to you clearly. You might ask someone if they need help carrying heavy bags to their car and they just say no. You can move on without feeling bad because you offered aid and they refused it. Other times you cannot tell if someone does need help or not because they aren't able to communicate if they need help or not. In moments like this, you take a risk. Someone lying down on the rocks below might be sleeping, or they might need Vanguard to save their lives. In moments like that, you make a choice, and all you can do is hope that you might make the right one. Although, for most, they prefer to call the Vanguard because if they are sleeping, it won't hurt for the Vanguard to be called. For the most part, while moments like that may be scary, you can reassure yourself that you still did the right thing, even if they didn't need help. You are willing to help them and that they can move on with their days. And then there are situations where people refuse your help no matter how badly they need it. The person who screams that no one helps them with chores even when you are actively cleaning alongside them. The person who screams that they paid for college themselves while signing a check from their mother-in-law. The kind of person that declares that they are the hero who overcame every single obstacle, who has never had to fight anything except mosquitoes. I have had experience with many different people throughout the world. Many of them I am proud to call my friend, others of which I am prouder to call them my enemy. And then there are some who make me shudder to know, not because they are more evil than the worst villains of the world, but because they are completely human. They are given many chances to choose to be a hero or a villain. They don't choose to be a survivor. They don't choose to be a hero. They don't choose to be a villain. And they don't even choose to live an exoteric life. They instead choose to see themselves as the victim, deciding that because they were hurt, it justifies any action they commit on anyone else. If they hurt others, it's justified because they were hurt first. One might think people like this are villains. Are they villains, or are they their own victims? It started with scratching in the walls. The young woman, Adeline, heard scratching in the walls, and she listened to it all night, refusing to tell her mother about the rat in the walls. Every night the scratching got worse until Adeline's mother could hear the scratching as well. So Adeline's mother left traps for the rat, and the next day the rat traps were cleared out, and for a while the scratching stopped, until the next full moon came and the rat returned. This time the scratching was worse, and Adeline stayed up all night listening to the rats get closer and closer to her while she slept. More traps were set out, except this time they didn't catch any rats. At least they didn't trap any whole rats. Some of the traps still had a severed limb, a still biting head, or a rotting tail. Still, the rats scratched and ate away at the wood in the house. Chewing, scratching, and scampering continued as more traps were tried by Adeline's mother. She tried poisons, glues, mechanical traps, and even labyrinths. Nothing could get the rats to quiet down for more than a night or two at a time. Eventually, the mother got a priest to bless the house. Priest's prayers, holy water, and incense cleansed the house of the infernal scampering, scratching, and chewing. So the rats' rotten bodies could be retrieved from Adeline's room and thrown away. Soon after, Adeline left for university, where she studied to become a civil engineer for her country. Following in her mother's footsteps, she would be second in her family to graduate from university. In university, she found a relationship with a soldier who dreamed of being a general. And in her university, the rats returned to scurry around her while she slept. This time, no longer content to scamper around in the walls, they would crawl over her while she slept, and they would swarm her room, chewing on her books, her desk, and even her clothing. By this point, she simply slept through the crimes of the rotting rats. Even while they crawled across her while she slept, and they gnawed on her flesh and hair, she continued to sleep, not caring about the rats that ate her flesh while she slept. And when she woke up, the rats were gone. She would treat her scratches in the morning, washing herself off, and she would move on to university. Even when others noticed, she was always scratched every day. Even when people asked if she needed help, she simply said that it was nothing. Even when she was forced to meet with the chancellor of the university, she insisted her wounds were nothing. She even denied that they were there at all. Still, she refused to remove the rats or have them be killed. When she graduated from the university and she accepted her diploma, she refused to attend her own graduation. That would take time away from her rats, and she moved in with her soldier boyfriend. When she slept next to him, the rats in the wall scurried, but they didn't bite her. So now relaxed, she slept deeply for the first time ever in a long time. However, her boyfriend could not always be with her. He had duties to his government and to his country. When he left her, the rats returned with a vengeance and gnawed on her exposed skin for the entire night. Unable to reach her soldier boyfriend, she instead called over a classmate that had a crush on her. She promised him sex and companionship that night, and all he had to do was agree to sleep with her. He was with her in less than an hour, and the rats were gone again. Adeline did not care that she broke her boyfriend's trust. She did not care that she cheated on him. She did not even care that she took advantage of someone's feelings for her. She only cared that the rats weren't bothering her. She soon lost her boyfriend when he found out that every night he was gone, she was sleeping with someone else. She told anyone who listened that it was to keep the rats away, but by now everyone who knew her personally knew about the rats, but also knew that she refused to do anything about them. She wouldn't let anyone inside of her house to trap them. She wouldn't buy traps for the rats. She wouldn't get a cat to catch the rats, and she wouldn't let the rats be poisoned. Her neighbors left their homes behind rather than hear the rats running around in the walls, and Adeline had to keep relying on acquaintances and strangers to keep her company with the rats. None would stay with her longer than a night, and as she grew lonelier, she grew harsher in the way she treated others. She grew paranoid, and she told stories to herself to convince herself that the world was in the wrong and she was in the right. She told herself that the rats in her walls were planted by everyone around her. She convinced herself that her friends, her family, even total strangers, turned themselves into rats at night to gnaw on her flesh. Even though she withdrew from the world would not withdraw from her. The vanguard were called in to do a courtesy check when she was not seen for days. The vanguard that made it to her house was expecting a typical hoarder's home. What they were not expecting was a very clean house. The lawn was maintained, and even though no one was at the door was unlocked and open ajar. When the vanguard went inside, they found that the house was surprisingly clean. The living room was spotless, the kitchen was untouched, and didn't have any food inside of it. The vanguard went deeper into the house. The bathroom was also clean and untouched. Closer to the bedroom, though, the smell of rot was clear. The door was opened, and while the vanguard was prepared for a dead body, what they saw inside was something much worse. It was clear by the piles of discarded takeout packages and plastic bags that Adeline had been living solely in this room for a long time. In one corner, the wall was broken open where a leaking pipe dripped water down for her to drink. Another corner was used as her toilet, and Adeline laid on her bed. Her body was half rotten, her legs gangrenous, and surrounding her body were dozens of rat corpses. In her hand she had an old rusty pocket knife, one that was she was still using when the vanguard came in. As she carved away parts of her gangrenous flesh to feed to the young rat pups that were nesting next to her. When she noticed the vanguard, who were all frozen from the horror they saw, she explained, "I have to feed the rats. It's the only way to get rid of them. Everyone tells me to trap them or kill them, but they will only bring more to replace them. If I feed them, they won't bother me," she said, not even noticing the full-grown rats gnawing on her head and arms, revealing flesh and bone beneath. "We have to get you out of here. You need help," the Vanguard medic said, only for her to scream at them. "You don't understand! Everyone hates me! Everyone hates me so much they will chew and tear and burrow and eat every scrap of me. No one has suffered more than me, and I have to do this to stay safe," he yelled as the medics desperately shooed the rats away, bringing her to the ambulance and to the nearby hospital. In the hospital, they had to keep her medicated to keep her from harming herself or the other patients any further. They were unable to save Adeline's legs, and the psychological experts were brought in to try and figure out what was going on. They couldn't figure out why she thought feeding the rats would make them stop. What they did know is that she was feeding rats her entire life. When the rats were first killed, she actually caught wild rats to bring back to her home, torturing herself by feeding the rats and catching more rats when the old ones died. Only recently did she have a self-sustaining colony, so she remained hidden from the world. What no one could figure out, at first at least, was why she kept seeking companions to keep the rats from gnawing on her. Not when she kept feeding the rats parts of her own body. Adeline's disconnect was a hatred of the rats, but also she would only surround herself with rats. As investigators tore down her home, they found bodies buried beneath the house. Many of her companions were torn apart by rats, feeding the rats, and that was when the connection was made. Adeline was feeding people to the rats to keep them from bothering her. The same rats she would refuse to kill, she would kill for them, telling everyone who listened that she hated them and that the rats were haunting her, only for her to feed people to the rats to try and buy herself some silence. Even though she was told many times that the rats could be killed, trapped, or poisoned, she refused to listen. Something inside of her mind convinced her that the rats couldn't be killed, couldn't be stopped, that they could only ever be appeased, and that she had to appease them. She was convinced that she was appeasing the rats by sacrificing everyone around her to keep herself safe. And when there was no one around her to sacrifice to the rats, she would sacrifice pieces of herself to appease her rodent stalkers. People offered her help. People offered to kill the rats. They offered her mental help. They offered her a place to stay. They even offered to keep her company against the rats she was feeding. But she didn't want their help. She only ever wanted to keep her rats appeased. Haunted and hunted by them, the rats would become her only companions. Even now in the hospital, she tells the nurses she can hear the rats in the walls. But there are no rats in the hospital.